Hey guys, just a little bit of a change since I uploaded my last video. It's kind of crazy to see myself in the camera like this, but obviously I went brunette, if you can't tell. Of course I vlogged it, so the process and the details and stuff like that will be in my next weekly vlog. Definitely tune into that if you just want to get more info, but that's not what this video is about. Also, Instagram and TikTok saw it first, so if you're not following me on Instagram or TikTok, I would definitely recommend, because I feel like they always get any life update first, especially Instagram. The Instagram girlies already know what's up. They've already seen it. This is old news. But anyway, for those of you who haven't noticed, it is now officially winter in the Southern Hemisphere. My audience is actually a pretty like 50-50 split between Northern and Southern Hemisphere girlies, which we love to see. But over the past few months, I've seen a lot of my besties in the Northern Hemisphere posting their summer book recommendations and summer TBRs, and as much as I wish that we were in summer right now because I truly am a summer girl at heart, the reality is that we are just not. Here in Australia, here in the Southern Hemisphere, it's getting colder, it's winter, I've got to accept it. And so I thought, you know what, whilst my besties are all living their best summer lives, us Southern Hemisphere girlies are still going to romanticize the winter months. We are going to get cozy, we're going to have our soft girl winter, and so I thought let's sit down and talk about some great winter book recommendations and also talk about some of the books that are on my winter TBR. So let's just jump straight into it. Starting off with my fantasy book recommendations, I feel like fantasy is such a winter vibe to me. I feel like there are a lot of romance books that are very summer coded. So in my mind, autumn and winter are very much like my time to escape into another world, really just like cozy up on the couch with a fantasy book. I just feel like fantasy is the epitome of cozy. Even the high stakes ones still gives me cozy vibes. Also, I will say, I've kind of tried to pick books that I haven't mentioned a million times before, because we all know that of course I recommend Magnolia Parks, ACOTAR, Throne of Glass, Addicted Calloway, like you know my like ultimate favorites, but I've tried to pick books that I haven't mentioned a million trillion times. First up for our fantasy recommendations, we have A Deadly Education. This is the first book in the Scholarmance trilogy, so obviously there are 3 books, which I think is just like a good amount. This is also YA, so it's a little bit easier, and also the books aren't super long. I just feel like these books are such a cozy winter read because they're kind of more of that dark academia feel. These books are set at a college called the Scholarmance, and it's basically a college for people with magic, and the college itself is magic. So I don't want to compare it to Harry Potter, but it really did remind me of Harry Potter in the sense of our main character is just like fighting monsters this whole time and trying to just literally survive her college experience, in the same way that I feel like Harry Potter was just like constantly being attacked by something. The whole aim of their college experience, like I said, is to survive, and their graduation is them literally escaping the college and being able to survive this like final challenge where there's just like heaps and heaps and heaps of monsters, and it's obviously very hard to escape. So they're trying to make a plan and they're trying to train for that. It's just such an interesting story, and I feel like it just has a little bit of everything. It's very well rounded, and it's not a book that I hear absolutely everyone talk about. So if you're looking for something a little bit different, I think this is a great place to start. I will say the second book is my favorite because it's when they're in their senior year and like doing their graduation situation, but I'd love to hear your thoughts if you end up reading this. Next up in this category, we have a cozy fantasy. If you don't know what cozy fantasy means, it's basically just a fantasy that has low stakes. There's no wars, there's no life or death. It's just a cute little cozy, wholesome fantasy. But I should probably show you the book that I'm talking about. This is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. I love this book so much. It was a 5-star read for me. It's also very short. I think it's around the 300-page mark. This is also one of my favorite covers that I own. I think it's just so beautiful. And this is about Emily Wilde, who is trying to write an Encyclopedia of Fairies. She is a very well-educated and intelligent woman, and she's been writing this encyclopedia, but she has kind of like one last area, one last chapter that she needs to write, but she needs to travel to a part of the world that she hasn't traveled to be able to do some field research on the magical creatures in that area to be able to kind of complete this encyclopedia. So she travels to this small town in this magical land, and she starts to study and write notes on all of the magical creatures that live there. I will say this book is very slow paced. There's not a whole lot going on, so I have seen people say that it's a bit boring to them, and I can totally understand why people may think that, because fair enough. But if you just want something cozy and sweet and just like calming, this is the perfect book for you. There's also a tiny little bit of romance. It's like an academic rivals to lovers romance, and the humor in this book was just so good to me. Like the banter between the 2 main characters who end up having the romance is just so freaking funny to me. The little snide remarks that they make, the wit, it's just, I don't know, I love it. It just brings such a smile to my face. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I loved it. Next up we have Vicious by V.E. Schwab, and this is such a winter fantasy to me. Again, this kind of has that dark academia feel to it. This is about two college roommates who are extremely intelligent guys, and they're working on a bit of a group project together where they're doing all these experiments, and they realize that if someone goes through a near-death experience and they survive, they come out the other end with some sort of superpower. So it's a bit of a superhero fantasy, which is so freaking fun. I haven't really read anything like it before. The two best friends, the two college roommates, have very different ideas about how they think these powers and this whole concept of near-death experiences should be used, and they actually become enemies. So it's like a friends to enemies story, and obviously the plot just goes from there. I don't want to say too much because I think it is one of those books that is so interesting to kind of go in fairly blind and just obviously find out stuff as you go along, because it is just fascinating. I feel like it's written so well. But yeah, I thought this was phenomenal. Next up we have Belladonna by Adeline Grace. This is a YA gothic fantasy. This book is about Signa. She is 19 years old and she is an orphan. And not only is she an orphan, but also every person that has ever really been close to her has somehow died. So there's this idea that death follows her everywhere she goes, but she is never affected by it. It's just the people around her. So it kind of is a bit of a curse. But this book basically starts off with Signa moving to another home because the people that were previously looking after her have died, like everyone else has in her life. And so she gets sent to this new family, this new home, and she is determined that the same thing that has happened everywhere else she's gone is not going to happen again. She is determined not to let anyone else around her die. So it's a bit of like a mystery vibe going on with her trying to figure out why this is happening, how it's happening, and how she can make it stop. And there's also a bit of a romance involved, but it is just so good. I will say again, it is a bit more of a slower paced story, but I personally really enjoyed it. I think I like a slower paced story sometimes. It's not something where there's always something dramatic and crazy happening, but it's so interesting, and it just has that like haunted house vibe, the like dark creepy forest vibe, still got a bit of a romance, some plot twists. Like it's so good. And lastly, for the fantasy category, we have The House on the Cerulean Sea. I read this a couple years ago now, and it's one of those books that has never quite left my head. The found family in this book is so beautiful, and it kind of gives me that cozy fantasy vibe. I don't know if it's considered cozy fantasy, but it gives me the same vibe. This story is about a caseworker called Linus, and he works basically in this fantasy world's version of the foster care system, and he gets assigned to a case where he has to go visit a family. And in this world there are homes that are specifically for kids that are more troubled, so kids that cause a lot of trouble or who have done something really bad or just like tend to misbehave. They get sent to like troubled youth kind of homes, and Linus is going to visit one of these homes. And it's just such a beautiful story because Linus kind of goes into this home having this very prejudiced view of these kids are bad, this home is bad, we need to shut this home down because these kids are just terrible. And also all of these kids are like different magical creatures as well, which is just so fun. Over time, Linus kind of starts to fall in love with this family and just create these bonds and these relationships with these kids and the head of the home as well. It's so freaking cute to see the kids do all of these different activities, and even Linus kind of getting involved and learning all of their backstories and the lives that they lived previously and the joy and the hope that they now have living. Oh, it's just so freaking cute. I think I need to do a reread at some stage because it's just such a gorgeous story. Moving on to our romance category. So first of all, we have You Deserve Each Other by Sarah Hogle. Like I said before, I feel like there are a lot of romance books that are like summer coded. They're set at a lake house or a beach house, or they're set in the summer. And so I feel like I kind of just picked books that weren't set at a summer house or a beach house or something like that. Not all of these are super wintry, but they just give me a cozy vibe, or they're just not super summery. Because sometimes reading a summer book in the winter just makes you feel sad and gives you FOMO. So hopefully these books don't do that. But back to this book. If you don't know what it's about, this is about a couple who are actually engaged, but Naomi is starting to realize that their relationship is just not the same as it used to be. And she's really starting to question whether they should actually be getting married. But the only issue is, if she backs out of this wedding, she's gonna have to pay all of these deposits for all of these wedding things. And so she kind of feels trapped by the situation. She doesn't have the money to get out of this. She doesn't have the communication skills to get out of this. So instead she thinks, you know what would be a good idea? Let me just sabotage this relationship and basically get my fiance to break up with me, because then none of this is my fault. So she pulls an Andy Anderson from How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days and starts trying to do some really annoying and just like frustrating things to her fiance and to their relationship so that he will end things. And I'll just leave you guys there. You can read the book to see what happens. It's just such a fun rom-com. I feel like the banter is great. The situations are just funny. Yes, there's a bit of miscommunication location because that's kind of the whole point of the book, but I just had so much fun with this, and I think it's just a really light-hearted, fun rom-com that's not set at the beach. Next up we have To All the Boys I've Loved Before. Now, I want to mention this for two reasons. One is, this is by Jenny Han, and as you may know, Jenny Han is the author of the Summer I Turned Pretty trilogy, which is obviously very summer coded. Like, that is the most summery book ever. And so I feel like for us Southern Hemisphere girlies, we might still want that fun YA light-hearted rom-com that gives all of the nostalgic feels, but we don't want summer. This is for you. This is the epitome of cozy, fun YA rom-com vibes. The second reason I wanted to mention this book is almost like as a symbol. This is a symbol of just a type of book that I want to recommend, and that is rereads. Over the past few months, I've started to do some rereads of my favorite books that I rated really highly previously and just had a lot of fun with, and I am realizing how fun it is to do rereads. I read this trilogy last year and I rated it really highly. I really enjoyed it, and it definitely became a comfort series for me. And so I definitely think I'm going to reread this series at some point, but like I said, this is just a symbol of any book that you might want to reread, a book that is a comfort to you. I feel like specifically in winter, you want to be cozy. What is the epitome of cozy? Comfort reads. And for me, this is a comfort read. You might have something different, but please go and reread your favorite book this winter, because I guarantee that you'll just have such a great time. Next up, we have Indigo Bridge by Daphne Perry. This is the first book in the Eden series. I feel like this series is just perfect if you want something quick and easy. I feel like these books are the perfect palate cleansers for between fantasies or after finishing a really long book where you just want to read a book where you don't have to think that much. These books are just perfect for that. So like I said, this is part of a series. There are 4 books out right now. There will be 6 total by the time all of the books are out. I think the next one comes out pretty soon. But the Edens are a family who all live in Quincy, Montana, so a small town. There's a great sense of found family, some really fun romances. Are they like the most life-changing romances I've ever read? Not really. But are they fun and are they easy? Yes, absolutely. They're all around 300 pages as well. So they're just those books that you pick up and you just fly through. I also feel like Daphne Perry's writing style is just so easy to read. Next up, we have Last Time We Met by Emily Houghton. I'm not exactly sure how to say it. This book is childhood friends to strangers to lovers. And the reason why I personally feel like it's very cozy and wintry is because it's set somewhere in the UK, I think. I actually can't remember exactly where. I want to say it's set in England, but I could be wrong. I kind of read this a while ago now. But tell me why anything set in England automatically gives me like cozy, wintry vibes. I've said this before, but this book kind of reminded me of an Emily Henry type novel where it's like literary fiction with romance. Like there's a lot more going on than just a romance. I wouldn't really say it's a rom-com. It has a lot of depth to it. So if you're an Emily Henry girly, I would definitely recommend. But yeah, I just don't hear a lot about it, and I don't know why, because it's so good. Next up, we kind of have the opposite to that. So instead of like a really deep, emotional, beautiful love story, we have a trashy rom-com. And I mean that in the best way possible. This is Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. And obviously this gives winter vibes because they are ice skaters. Actually, that reminds me, I should have picked out From Luke Off With Love. I would also recommend that because that is also an ice skating romance. Enemies to Lovers, Slow Burn. So that's a little bonus. But back to Icebreaker. This book is just like a fun, silly, good time. If for some reason you haven't heard what this is about, it is about a figure skater and a hockey player, and they're both college athletes at the same college, and they now have to share an ice rink because an incident occurred at the hockey rink. Like all the figure skaters at this college and now all the hockey players at this college are now sharing one rink. And Stacy is not happy about it. This is Grumpy Sunshine reverse. So the girl is grumpy, the guy is sunshine. He is the epitome of a golden retriever boyfriend, and he is just trying so hard to become Stacy's friend and get her to like him, and she is just like not having it. I will say this is not slow burn at all, and this one is a bit spicy, so obviously keep that in mind depending on your reading preferences. But yeah, it's just a fun, silly, good time. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the found family in this book. That was probably my favorite thing, and this is actually the start of a series of interconnected standalones. The rest aren't out yet, but they will be soon. And then lastly, for our romance category, we have Second First Impressions by Sally Thorne. This is one of my OG favorites. I actually really need to reread this because I loved it the first time I read it, like probably over 2 years ago now. This is definitely a rom-com, and it is about Ruthie, who works at an aged care home, and she is introverted. She's more quiet and reserved. She loves spending time by herself at home, watching TV shows, having bubble baths, reading books. She feels like she is giving grandma, which we will say, there's nothing wrong with being a homebody. But there are a lot of people in Ruthie's life that are like, you need to get out there, you need to date, you need to like go out and live your young life to the fullest, you know? And then she meets Teddy, and Teddy is just like a classic bad boy. He rides a motorbike, he has tattoos, he loves to push Ruthie's buttons, and he basically gets a job at the aged care home too. And honestly, just talking about this book is reminding me of so many of the funny little scenes happen in this book and just how funny and silly and goofy it is. I feel like a lot of people like this book, a lot of people don't. It's very hit and miss, I think. So I don't know if it'll be for everyone, but if you feel like you're just like a wholesome homebody girly and you might be able to relate to Ruthie like I did, definitely a silly, goofy time. But I think that's exactly what you need sometimes. Moving on to our other category. The first one that I want to recommend, which I feel like I've recommended a lot of times, so I'll only talk about it for a sec, but we have The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is a YA mystery trilogy. It's about a teenage girl who inherits like literally billions of dollars from a guy that she doesn't even know, and his family are now really not happy with her because they're like, we were supposed to get all of that inheritance and now this random girl who we didn't even know existed is getting it. Like, that is not fair. And part of the deal for her to be able to get this inheritance is that she has to live in the guy who passed away, his mansion, for a year. And so now she's forced to live in this mansion for a year, which you might be like, that's not a bad deal at all. Like, I'd love to live in a mansion. But the rest of his family also live in that mansion and they don't like her and they are out to get her. There are also 4 grandsons who are also teenagers and they kind of all band together with our main character to basically try and solve this mystery as to why she got this money and why she was like listed on the will. And it's just so much fun. It's very fast paced, very easy to read. And if you haven't read this yet, you absolutely need to. Another YA book that I want to mention is The Girls Ive Been by Tess Sharp. This is about a daughter of a con artist who has managed to escape her con artist mum and is now like lying low, kind of trying to live a normal life basically. And then she manages to get involved in a bank robbery and now she is a hostage. And so in this story you get a then and now timeline where obviously the now timeline is her basically being a part of this hostage situation, this robbery situation, and the then timeline is her talking about her growing up and all the things that she learned from having a mum who is a con artist, and also how her mum basically got her to help her do her cons. And so she also learned a lot growing up about being a con artist that she is now applying in the current situation of being a hostage. And it's so freaking fascinating. But if you just want something quick, fast-paced, a good YA time, I definitely recommend. Next up, we have a historical fiction. I don't read a lot of historical fiction, but the ones that I do read, I honestly really enjoy, so maybe I need to read more of them. This is City of Girls by Elizabeth Gilbert. Some people like to compare this to The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and whilst I wouldn't say that it's like the exact same thing at all, it does have that same old Hollywood glamour vibe to it, and I love the old Hollywood glamour vibe. To be fair, this is actually set in New York, not in Hollywood, but it still has that same glamorous vibe to it. It's set in the 40s and it's literally just about this girl growing up in New York in the 40s and all of the silly things that she gets up to, the parties that she goes to, the relationships she has, the people that she dates, what life was like. She also is a part of like a theater program, so there's parties, there's shows, she helps do costumes and they talk about fashion. It's very much no plot, just vibes to me. Like, I don't know what the plot of this book was. It was purely vibes, but I loved it. Loved every second of it. Those are all of my winter recommendations, and now I want to quickly go through a few books that are on my winter TBR. Let's start off with my fantasy books. I have 3. The first one that I really need to get to is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I have had this on my TBR for over a year at this point. I know that it's dark academia, which really intrigues me, but I think I'm a bit scared that it's going to be almost just like a bit too dark for my liking. I really have no idea. All I know is it's like, what, secret societies? It honestly does sound so fascinating. It says, Alex has been tasked with monitoring the mysterious activities of Yale's secret societies that have yielded some of the most famous and influential people in the world. Now there's a dead girl on campus and Alex seems to be the only person who won't accept the neat answer the police and campus administration have come up with for her murder. Fascinating. I also really want to get to One for My Enemy by Olivia Blake. I'm pretty sure this is a Romeo and Juliet? Oh my gosh. Romeo and Juliet retelling. I saw bestie Sarah recently read this. It was already on my physical TBR, but seeing her talk about it and seeing her read it really kind of bumped it up on my list. Like, it was on the list before, but now it's like right near the top. Sarah just made it sound really intriguing, and I think from what she was saying, it's more of like a modern fantasy. I assume like an urban fantasy. Obviously 2 opposing families, the whole Romeo and Juliet situation. Crime boss father. We love some gang lord families. I really am just fascinated to try this out, and this book has pictures. We love a book with pictures. I probably shouldn't look at them because they potentially could be spoilers, but I don't know who any of these characters are yet, so it's not a spoiler if you don't even know who the characters are. We'll see if we get to this. Also, this is again one of my favorite covers that I own. It's beautiful. And then the last fantasy that I have on this list is Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. I really want to read this soon as well because I have been wanting to read a Brandon Sanderson book for the longest time, but it just seems so intimidating to me. I don't really know why. I feel like Brandon Sanderson just feels like real fantasy. Like, I feel like some of the fantasy books that I read are just like fun, silly little romance fantasies, and this is like real fantasy. Like, this is what real fantasy readers read. It says on the back, Warbreaker is a story of two sisters who happen to be princesses. The god king one of them has to marry, a lesser god, and an immortal trying to undo the mistakes he made hundreds of years ago. Theirs is a world in which those who die in glory return as gods. A world transformed by biochromatic magic, a power based on an essence known as breath, which can only be collected 1 unit at a time from individual people. But it's worth it. By using breath and drawing upon the color in everyday objects, all manner of miracles and mischief can be performed. Like, doesn't that magic system sound so fascinating to you? I've heard incredible things about Brandon Sanderson's magic systems in general. Like, everyone raves about them. I'm just so intrigued. I also have a couple romance books which I'd love to get to. First of all, we have This Time It's Real by Anne Liang or Lang. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it, but this is YA and it is like a fake dating situation. I think it's about a girl who pretended to have a boyfriend. She doesn't actually have a boyfriend, so now she has to fake date to make it like seem legit, I guess. But it just looks like it's going to be a fun time, and a lot of people have told me that they loved this, so that also bumped it up on my TBR. And then I recently got this one in the mail, and so of course I'm so intrigued. This is Charlie, Love and Cliches by Ella Mays, and this is a workplace romance about a girl who I think like went on a few dates with this guy and then just like I guess it fizzled out. I don't really know what the situation was, but apparently now he's come in as a new employee in the company that she works for, and he does not remember her at all, which is very awkward because she obviously remembers him. So I'm very intrigued to see where that goes, and I've heard that this is just a really cute time as well. And the last book that I have to talk about is this one, which is actually a library book. It's called Tiny Pretty Things, and I'm pretty sure this is a TV show, but I've had a few friends recommend this TV show to me, and I'm just not like a huge TV show person. When I saw that it was a book, I was like, this might be the way that I can consume this story, and it also just sounds so fascinating. It's about one of Manhattan's most elite ballet schools, so they're all ballerinas, and I think it just follows a bunch of different girls in this ballet school and all of their secrets. So I think it's going to be one of those like everyone's putting on a very like put together perfect front, but there's like a lot happening behind the scenes, and that just sounds like drama and kind of juicy, and I want to know what the secrets are. So hopefully I'll pick up this soon. It also was from the YA section, so obviously it must be YA, and I love YA, so I'm very intrigued by this one. But those are all the books that I have to talk about today. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing some of my book recommendations and also what's on my winter TBR. Like I said at the beginning, I'm trying really hard to really romanticize winter, because honestly I find it really hard to do that. I feel like it is so easy to mope around in winter. It is so easy to just kind of be a little bit sad. I definitely find myself not feeling as bubbly and joyful as usual in the winter time, but I'm gonna make an active effort to do things that bring me joy, spend some time in the sunshine, because that always makes me feel better, with my SPF of course, and just enjoy the good parts of winter. Enjoy the tracksuits and the coziness and the warm hearty meals. Like, there are so many good things that come with winter, and I just need to focus on those. So for all of my summer girlies, I hope you have the best hot girl summer ever. But for all of us winter girlies, we're gonna have a wholesome soft girl winter, and I'm here for it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I love you all so much, and I will see you in my next video very soon. Goodbye.